A millionaire lives in a humble house, hiding a past filled with secrets. A new neighboring couple finds a mysterious letter that reveals fragments of his story. Investigations lead to the discovery of a financial scandal and a family betrayal buried in time. The arrival of an old acquaintance and a public accusation put his life at risk. Now he must face the past while fighting to protect his secrets. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the asphalt of Acacia Street, a discreet address in the serene valley neighborhood where modest homes lined up in perfect suburban harmony. Among them stood a peculiar residence, not for its grandeur but for its almost studied simplicity. House number 237, with its faded grey walls and meticulously maintained garden, held more mysteries than its facade revealed. Emily and Michael, newly arrived in the neighborhood, were unloading the last boxes from their move when they noticed, for the first time, the resident of the grey house. A man in his 60s, with neatly trimmed grey hair and simple yet impeccably clean clothes, walked across his garden with measured steps. His movements were precise, almost rehearsed, as if each gesture were part of a long-established choreography. "Have you noticed he always leaves exactly at 4:30 in the afternoon?" Emily commented to Michael, pretending to organize some plants in the garden. Her husband nodded, equally intrigued by the figure of the neighbor, who every day followed a routine timed with military precision. Mrs. Margaret, the lady from House 235, was quick to fuel the young couple's curiosity with stories about the mysterious neighbor. "Arthur Thompson," she pronounced the name as if revealing a precious secret. "He's lived here for over 15 years, but no one really knows who he is. Some say he lost everything in the stock market, others that he fled from a scandal, but it's just neighborhood gossip." Emily's curiosity grew with each passing day. As an investigative journalist, she couldn't ignore the details that seemed out of place. The curtains in the house, for example, were made of a fabric too fine for the neighborhood's standards. And there were moments when, through the windows, she swore she saw golden reflections that contrasted with the apparent simplicity of the surroundings. Michael, an architect by training, also noticed peculiarities in the house's structure. "The foundations are too solid for a building of this era," he remarked one evening, while examining old blueprints of the area he had obtained from the city hall. "And look at these modifications to the original design. They seem to have been made to reinforce security." The first direct contact with Arthur happened on a Sunday morning when Emily, distracted by her gardenias, let the hose slip, accidentally wetting the shoes of the passing neighbor. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, embarrassed. Arthur merely smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and replied in a surprisingly soft voice, "Don't worry, miss. Water is life." That seemingly simple phrase kept echoing in Emily's mind. There was something in the way he spoke, a refined politeness that contradicted his modest appearance. His hands, she noticed, were too soft for someone who lived a simple life. The neighborhood routine continued as usual, but gradually, small events began to disturb the apparent tranquility. First, it was the arrival of letters with elegant crests, discreetly delivered to Arthur's house. Then the nighttime visits of a luxurious car that parked for exactly 15 minutes in front of the residence, always on Tuesdays. The mystery deepened when, during a heavy rain, an object fell from the attic of Emily and Michael's house. It was an old cigar box, and inside it, a yellowed photograph showed a group of people in front of a grand mansion. At the center of the image, younger but unmistakable, was Arthur Thompson wearing an impeccable suit and exuding an air of authority that bore no resemblance to the reclusive man who now lived in the grey house. That night, as the wind blew through the trees on Acacia Street, Emily and Michael exchanged glances, aware that they had stumbled upon something much larger than mere curiosity about an eccentric neighbor. The photograph in their hands was just the first piece of a puzzle that promised to reveal long-buried secrets at the heart of that quiet middle-class neighborhood. The discovery of the photograph triggered a series of events that would transform life in the peaceful, serene valley neighborhood. The next morning, as they had coffee, Emily and Michael meticulously studied every detail of the found image. The mansion in the background of the photograph displayed architecture characteristic of the 80s, with its imposing pillars and meticulously planned gardens. "Look at this," Michael pointed to a nearly faded inscription on the back of the photo. Inauguration of Thompson and Allen Industries, 1985. Emily, with her sharp journalistic instincts, immediately began taking notes. The company's name sounded vaguely familiar, like a story she had heard at some point in her career. That same afternoon, while organizing their basement, they found more than they expected. Hidden among old beams, a box of documents revealed its contents: yellowed newspaper clippings, old letters, and photographs that seemed to tell a long-forgotten story. One letter in particular caught the couple's attention. It was addressed to a certain Claire Thompson, dated 1990. "My dear Claire," Emily read aloud, "the decisions we make are not always the ones our hearts desire. The empire we built is at risk, and I must protect our legacy. Forgive me for my absence, but I promise that one day you will understand. With love, eh?" The elegant and firm handwriting matched the posture Arthur displayed in the old photograph. Michael, analyzing the newspaper clippings, discovered headlines about one of the largest textile companies in the country. Thompson and Allen Industries had been a true industrial empire, responsible for employing thousands of people. A chance encounter at the neighborhood market brought more pieces to the puzzle. Mrs. Margaret, always a source of valuable information, mentioned an unusual visit Arthur had received the previous week. "It was a very elegant lady," she confided. "She arrived in an imported car and stayed only a few minutes. When she left, she seemed disturbed." The couple's curiosity piqued when, during an afternoon of gardening, they noticed Arthur receiving a brown envelope from a man in a suit. The exchange was quick, but it was enough for them to notice the tension on their usually stoic neighbor's face. Emily decided to do what she did best: investigate. Using her contacts at the newspaper where she worked, she began researching Thompson and Allen Industries. The information she found was intriguing. The company had disappeared from the market in the early 90s under circumstances that were never fully explained. An unexpected phone call disrupted the couple's routine. It was Ryan, an old college friend of Emily's from journalism school, now an editor at a major newspaper. "You won't believe what I found in the archives," he said, his voice filled with excitement. Thompson and Allen Industries didn't go bankrupt. The money was all donated to charities, but there are rumors that a large sum was transferred to overseas accounts. Meanwhile, Michael was making his own discoveries. As an architect, he gained access to the original blueprints of Arthur's house. The plans revealed significant modifications to the original structure, including the addition of a basement that wasn't listed in the official records. Tension in the neighborhood grew when a series of unfamiliar cars began driving down the street. They were luxurious vehicles with tinted windows, slowly passing by Arthur's house. The mysterious neighbor, in turn, subtly altered his routine, starting to leave at irregular hours. One night, during a particularly heavy storm, Emily watched a peculiar scene from her window. Arthur was in his garden, standing in the rain, having an animated conversation with an elegant woman holding a black umbrella. The argument seemed intense, and at one point, the woman handed him an envelope and hurried away. The next day, while Michael was reviewing the renovation plans for their own house, he made a surprising discovery. The two homes, theirs and Arthur's, shared an old wall, and there were signs of a long sealed passageway between them. The mystery of the grey house was beginning to intertwine with their own history in ways they could never have imagined. Dawn brought with it a thick fog that hung over Acacia Street, as if nature itself conspired to keep the neighborhood's secrets hidden. Emily woke up early, her mind filled with unanswered questions. As she prepared coffee, she gazed out the kitchen window at the silhouette of Arthur's house slowly emerging from the morning mist. Michael joined her, bringing the old blueprints he had studied the night before. "Look at this," he said, spreading the papers on the table. "This passage between the houses, it's not just an architectural coincidence. It seems to have been intentionally designed." Intrigued, Emily examined the drawings. The passage, now sealed, connected the basement of their house to Arthur's. "But why?" she murmured, more to herself than to Michael. What kind of secret would justify such a construction? That afternoon, as the couple discussed their findings, in the garden, they were surprised by an unexpected visitor. Claire, the woman mentioned in the old letter, appeared before them like a figure from the past. Elegant and with an air of distinction that the years had not erased, she introduced herself as an old family friend who had lived in that house decades ago. "You've found something, haven't you?" Claire asked, her sharp eyes assessing the surprised expressions on Emily and Michael's faces. "Something about the past of this house, and about Arthur." Hesitant, the couple shared their discoveries with Claire. As they spoke, the lady's face alternated between nostalgia and concern. "Arthur's story is more complex than you can imagine," she finally said, "and it is intertwined with the history of this street, this neighborhood, and with yours as well." Claire revealed that she and Arthur had been more than just friends. They were cousins and partners at Thompson and Allen Industries. "Our company was more than just a business," she explained. "It was a family legacy built over generations. But with success came responsibilities and secrets." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching car. It was the same luxurious vehicle that Emily and Michael had noticed earlier. Claire visibly tensed. "I can't stay long," she said hurriedly, "but you need to know that not everything is as it seems. Arthur, he made difficult choices to protect many people." Before leaving, Claire handed Emily a small object, an ornate, antique key. "This will open many doors," she said enigmatically, "but remember, some doors are perhaps better left closed." In the days that followed, Emily and Michael found themselves increasingly drawn into the mystery. The key Claire had given them seemed to burn in their hands, a promise of answers and at the same time a warning of unknown dangers. Determined to unravel the mystery, the couple began to explore their own home more deeply. One night, while examining the basement, Michael noticed an irregularity in the wall that divided the two houses. Carefully removing some loose bricks, they discovered a small hidden compartment. Inside, they found a dusty diary and a series of old documents. The diary, written by someone named Edward Thompson, told a story of ambition, betrayal, and a pact made decades ago. It mentioned a hidden fortune and an elaborate scheme to protect not only the money, but also the people involved. As they read, Emily and Michael began to understand that the Serene Valley neighborhood was not just a randomly chosen location. Each house, each resident, seemed to be part of a larger plan, an intricate web of protection and secrets. A passage from the diary particularly caught Emily's attention. "The true treasure isn't in bank accounts or properties. It's in the lives we touch, the families we protect. Arthur understood this better than any of us." The mention of Michael's grandfather in the documents added a new personal dimension to the investigation. Apparently, he hadn't just been an employee, but a close confidant of the Thompson and Allen Industries family, somehow involved in the events that led to the company's dissolution. As the puzzle pieces began to fall into place, Emily and Michael realized they were facing something much bigger than they had initially imagined. It wasn't just the story of a wealthy man living a modest life, but an intricate plan involving dozens of lives, spanning decades of carefully guarded secrets. That night, as the full moon illuminated Acacia Street, the couple observed Arthur's house with new eyes. The lights on the upper floor cast dancing shadows on the curtains, as if the ghosts of the past were restless, eager for their story to finally be told. Emily held Michael's hand, feeling the weight of the responsibility they now carried. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael gently squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on the grey house. "I think it's time we have a talk with our neighbor," he replied, his voice a mix of determination and apprehension. Little did they know that, across the street, behind the carefully drawn curtains, Arthur Thompson was watching them, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The moment he had both feared and, in a way, anticipated had finally arrived. The decision to confront Arthur weighed on Emily and Michael like a storm cloud ready to burst. The next morning, as they prepared to take that crucial step, the unexpected happened. A firm knock at the door startled them, and upon opening it they found Arthur Thompson himself standing there. "I think it's time we talked," he said, his calm voice contrasting with the tension evident in his eyes. You've uncovered more than you should have, and now there's no turning back. Sitting in the living room, the air heavy with decades of secrets about to be revealed, Arthur began his story. Thompson and Allen Industries wasn't just a company, he explained. It was the heart of a protective network that spanned generations. Emily and Michael listened intently as Arthur unraveled a complex tale of power, responsibility, and sacrifice. The company, he revealed, had been founded with a dual purpose: to generate wealth, yes, but also to create a support system for families affected by social and economic injustices. We were more than businessmen, Arthur continued, his voice heavy with emotion. We were guardians of a legacy of justice and compassion, but over time the weight of this secret became unbearable. Michael, intrigued, asked about his grandfather's role in this story. Arthur smiled sadly. Your grandfather, Michael, was one of our most trusted allies. He helped establish many of the families living in this neighborhood, people who needed a fresh start, away from traumatic pasts or dangerous situations. The revelation struck the couple like a bolt of lightning. The entire neighborhood, they realized, was part of something much larger. Every house, every neighbor, had a hidden story, a reason for being there. Emily, recovering from the shock, questioned, "But why do you live like this, Arthur? Why this facade of a simple life?" Arthur stood up, walking to the window. His gaze wandered over the quiet street before he answered, "Because this is the best way to protect what we've built. My apparent poverty is a shield not just for me but for everyone here. As long as I live like this, no one will suspect the true nature of this place." The following hours were a whirlwind of revelations. Arthur spoke about how the company had been strategically dissolved, its assets carefully distributed to continue funding the support network. He spoke of Claire, his cousin and confidant, who remained a vital link to the outside world. "But now," Arthur said with a heavy sigh, "everything is at risk. There are people who suspect, who want to expose our operation, not for justice, but for greed and vengeance." It was at that moment that Emily understood the true meaning of the mysterious cars and the nighttime visits. They weren't threats to Arthur personally, but to the entire system he protected. Michael, connecting the dots, asked about the secret passage between the houses. Arthur nodded, confirming his suspicions. It was an escape route, a precaution. For times of crisis, every house on this street has its own hidden defenses. As the afternoon progressed, the couple found themselves facing a moral dilemma. What would they do with this information? Emily, as a journalist, felt the weight of the truth in her hands. Michael, on the other hand, saw his grandfather's legacy in a new light. Arthur, sensing their internal conflict, spoke softly. "You, too, are now part of this, whether you like it or not. The choice ahead of you isn't about revealing a secret, but about protecting lives." At that moment, a commotion outside caught everyone's attention. Through the window, they saw several cars parking on the street, men in suits stepping out hurriedly. Arthur paled. "They're here," he murmured. "The confrontation I feared for so long has finally arrived." Emily and Michael exchanged glances, adrenaline coursing through their veins. In a matter of hours, they had gone from curious neighbors to key players in a drama that had been unfolding for decades. Arthur walked over to a bookshelf, activating a hidden mechanism that revealed a secret compartment. From it, he retrieved a thick folder. "Here's everything, names, dates, accounts. It's our only protection now." As the sound of footsteps approached the front door, Arthur turned to the couple, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Because what happens in the next few minutes will determine not only our future, but that of everyone on this street." Emily held Michael's hand, feeling the weight of the decision they were about to make. The fate of Serene Valley and all its secrets now rested in their hands. The sound of firm footsteps echoed down Acacia Street, breaking the usual tranquility of the neighborhood. Emily, Michael, and Arthur remained motionless in the room, the tension palpable in the air. Arthur's gaze alternated between the window and the folder in his hands, as if he were evaluating his options one last time. "We don't have much time," Arthur whispered, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to act quickly." He moved with surprising agility for someone who always seemed so composed. activating another hidden mechanism that revealed a small safe embedded in the wall. Emily, her journalist mind racing, asked, "Who are these people, Arthur? What exactly do they want?" Arthur, storing documents in the safe, replied without turning around, "They are the ghosts of our past, Emily. People who were harmed, or think they were, by the decisions we made. Some are former partners. Others are relatives of those we helped protect. They want to expose everything, no matter the cost." Michael, who was watching through the window, warned, "They're splitting up. Some are heading to the back of the house." At that moment, Emily's phone vibrated. It was a message from Claire. "I'm on my way. Stay safe. Help is coming." Arthur, upon hearing this, seemed momentarily relieved. Claire has always been our anchor in times of crisis. If she says help is on the way, we should trust her. The sound of the doorbell cut through the air, followed by insistent knocking at the door. A deep, authoritative male voice echoed, "Mr. Thompson, we know you're in there. We have some questions that need answering." Arthur gestured for Emily and Michael to follow him. Silently, he led them to the basement, revealing a hidden passage behind an old bookshelf. This tunnel connects several houses in the neighborhood. It was built as a precaution for moments like this. As they moved through the dimly lit tunnel, Emily couldn't help but think about all the lives affected by this web of secrets. Entire families living under false identities, protected by an elaborate system of well-intentioned lies. Michael, on the other hand, was lost in thoughts about his grandfather. How many secrets had he carried? How deep was his involvement in this complex scheme? The tunnel led to the basement of the neighboring house, belonging to Mrs. Margaret. To the couple's surprise, the elderly woman was waiting for them, a serious expression on her usually kind face. "So the day has finally come," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Arthur, the contingency plan is in motion. The other families are being notified." Emily and Michael exchanged bewildered glances. Apparently, Mrs. Margaret's involvement went far beyond simple neighborhood gossip. Arthur nodded gratefully. "Margaret has been our sentinel for years," he explained to the couple. "She monitors the neighborhood, ensures everyone stays safe." A noise from the street alerted them. Through the basement window, they saw more cars arriving. Some of the newcomers, however, did not seem hostile. There was an air of organization in their movements, as if they were executing a long-established plan. "It's the cavalry," murmured Arthur, a faint smile forming on his lips. "Claire must have activated our support network." Emily's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a call from her editor at the newspaper. Hesitant, she answered, "Say it on speakerphone." "Emily," the editor's voice sounded tense, "I'm getting reports about a large-scale operation happening in your neighborhood, something related to a witness protection scheme. Do you know anything about this?" Emily's gaze met Arthur's, a silent question hanging between them. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, as if making the most difficult decision of his life, before slowly nodding. "Ryan," Emily replied, her voice steady, "I have a story for you, but first you need to understand something. What I'm about to tell you could change many lives. We need to do this the right way." As Emily began explaining the situation to her editor, ensuring the truth would be revealed in a controlled and responsible manner, the sounds of heated discussion could be heard coming from the street. Michael, watching from the window, saw Claire emerge from one of the newly arrived cars, accompanied by men who appeared to be lawyers and government officials. She walked with determination toward the group that had surrounded Arthur's house. The tension in the basement was palpable. Arthur, Emily, and Michael knew the next few moments would be crucial. The truth about Serene Valley was about to come to light, and with it, the fate of dozens of families who had found refuge in that small neighborhood. As the sound of raised voices grew louder outside, Arthur turned to the couple, his eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "No matter what happens now," he said, "you two are part of this. The story of Serene Valley is in your hands." With those words, they prepared to face whatever awaited them outside, knowing that the world as they knew it was about to change forever. The air was thick with tension as Arthur, Emily, and Michael emerged from Margaret's house, facing the chaotic scene unfolding on Acacia Street. The neighborhood, once so peaceful, was now buzzing with activity. News vans were beginning to arrive, drawn by the unusual commotion. Claire, as elegant as ever, stood at the center of a circle of people, her firm voice rising above the chatter. "Gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but there are protocols to follow. What we have here is far more complex than you imagine." Emily, her journalistic instincts on high alert, noticed the presence of important figures, a federal judge, representatives from the public prosecutor's office, and even a senator known for his work in human rights. The situation was clearly more serious and far-reaching than they had anticipated. Arthur stepped forward, his upright posture contrasting with the modest figure the neighborhood knew. "I am here," he announced, his voice carrying an authority. That surprised everyone. "And I am ready to clarify everything." A middle-aged man dressed in an expensive suit stepped out from the group. His face was twisted with anger. "Thompson, you destroyed my family. All these years, you knew where my sister was and never said a word." Arthur faced the man with a mix of compassion and firmness. "Mr. Allen, your sister chose to disappear. She was protecting not only herself but you and your children as well." Michael, observing the scene, began to understand the magnitude of what Serene Valley represented. It wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a refuge, a place where lives were rebuilt and secrets were kept for a greater good. As the discussion intensified, Emily noticed movement in the other houses. Neighbors she had known for months began to emerge, each carrying folders or documents. They were pieces of a giant puzzle, finally coming together. The federal judge, recognizing the complexity of the situation, intervened. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that we are facing something unprecedented. I suggest we move to a more appropriate location to discuss this properly." Claire, seeing an opportunity, suggested, "The community center. It's spacious and can accommodate everyone, plus it's neutral ground." As the group moved toward the community center, Emily pulled Michael aside. "This is bigger than any story I've ever covered," she whispered, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "But how do we tell this story without putting these people at risk?" Michael squeezed her hand, reassuring her. "Together. We'll do this together and carefully." At the community center, chairs were quickly arranged in a large circle. Arthur took the center with Claire by his side. The senator, the judge, and the representatives from the public prosecutor's office formed a semicircle in front. Arthur began his narrative, his voice echoing through the silent hall. 30 years ago, we realized our justice system had flaws. Innocent people were persecuted. Families were destroyed by revenge or greed. We decided to do something about it," he continued, detailing how Thompson and Allen Industries had transformed from a simple textile company into an elaborate protection network, how they had created new identities, relocated entire families, and built a community based on secrets, but also on compassion. Emily, seated among the journalists present, took furious notes. Every word from Arthur revealed layers of a story she knew would take years to fully tell. As Arthur spoke, faces in the audience changed. Anger gave way to understanding. Shock turned to admiration. Mr. Almeida, who had been furious earlier, was now silently crying, holding a photo that Claire had kindly handed him, a recent picture of his sister, smiling and safe. Michael, on the other hand, felt a deep connection with his late grandfather. The stories Arthur used to tell painted a portrait of a courageous and compassionate man, someone who had risked everything to help others. As the meeting stretched into the night, decisions began to be made. The federal judge, impressed by the scale and nobility of the project, suggested creating a task force to evaluate each case individually, ensuring that justice and compassion went hand in hand. The senator, seeing the potential for significant reform in the witness protection system, began drafting plans for legislation that could formalize and expand the Serene Valley model. As the night wore on, Emily and Michael found themselves at the center of something extraordinary. They were no longer just observers or investigators, but integral parts of a community that was about to transform how society dealt with justice and protection. Arthur, exhausted but visibly relieved, approached the couple. "You two," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "have brought to light something that has been in the shadows for far too long. Now we have the chance to do this the right way, openly." Emily, firmly holding her pen and notebook, knew she had in her hands not just a story, but the responsibility to tell it in a way that protected those who needed it most. Michael, looking around at the faces, he now knew not just as neighbors, but as guardians of deep secrets, felt the weight of his grandfather's legacy and the path that lay ahead. As the sun began to rise, casting its first rays over Serene Valley, the neighborhood awoke to a new day. A day when long-kept secrets would begin to be revealed, and a unique community prepared to face the outside world, united by truth and compassion. In the weeks following the revelation about Serene Valley, the neighborhood became the epicenter of a quiet revolution. Emily, with her journalistic skills, and Michael, with his architectural knowledge, found themselves at the heart of a whirlwind of activity. The sun had barely risen when Emily received a call from her editor-in-chief. "I want you to lead a special series on Serene Valley," he said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "But with one condition: we have to protect these people. This is an opportunity to do journalism with social responsibility." Emily accepted the challenge, aware of the delicate balance between revealing the truth and protecting those who still needed anonymity. She began working closely with Arthur and Claire, unraveling layers of stories that had remained hidden for decades. Meanwhile, Michael found himself immersed in a fascinating project. The senator, impressed by the ingenuity of the security measures in Serene Valley, invited him to lead a team that would study how to implement similar features in other neighborhoods, creating a national network of safe communities. One morning, as they worked together at the kitchen table, Emily looked at Michael with a mix of admiration and concern. "Do you realize how much our lives have changed? Just a few weeks ago, we were just a curious couple wondering about a strange neighbor." Michael smiled, taking her hand. "And now we're in the middle of something that could change the entire country. It's scary but also exciting, isn't it?" The neighborhood, in turn, was undergoing a transformation. The simple facades of the houses remained the same, but there was a new energy in the air. Neighbors who once barely greeted each other now gathered for long conversations, sharing stories of their past and present lives. Mrs. Margaret, revealed as a key player in the operation of Serene Valley, became something of a local celebrity. Her home turned into a meeting point for community gatherings, where strategies were discussed and new friendships were forged. One afternoon, as Emily interviewed a group of residents for her series of reports, a young woman approached timidly. "My real name is Laura," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I fled an abusive relationship 5 years ago. Serene Valley gave me a new life, a new identity. I want to tell my story, but I'm afraid." Emily held Laura's hands, feeling the weight of responsibility in her words. "We'll tell your story, Laura, but we'll do it in a way that keeps you protected. Your courage could help others in the same situation." Meanwhile, Michael was leading a team of architects and engineers on an ambitious project. They were redesigning parts of the neighborhood, incorporating security measures in a more organic and less visible way. "We want Serene Valley to be a model," he explained during a meeting, "a place where safety and community go hand in hand without feeling like a fortress." Arthur, observing all these changes, felt a mix of pride and apprehension. One evening, he invited Emily and Michael to dinner at his house, the first time anyone other than Claire had entered in years. Seated at the table, savoring a wine that Arthur had kept for decades for a special occasion, he shared his thoughts. "When I started all this, I never imagined it would come to this point. The two of you have brought to light something that had been in the shadows for a long time. Now we have the chance to make a difference on a national scale." Emily, moved by Arthur's sincerity, asked, "Have you ever regretted it, dedicating your life to this?" Arthur fell silent for a moment, his gaze distant. "There were difficult times, of course, moments when I wondered if the personal cost was worth it. But then I would see a family rebuilding their life, a child growing up in safety, and I knew I had made the right choice." As the night went on, the three of them discussed the future. Emily's series of reports was about to be published. Michael's architectural project was entering the implementation phase, and Arthur was preparing to testify before a special Senate committee. "What comes next?" Michael asked, looking out the window at the quiet street outside. Arthur smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Transformation. Serene Valley was just the beginning. Now we have the chance to take this idea across the country. A protection system that doesn't just hide people, but helps them rebuild their lives. Emily, feeling the weight of the moment, raised her glass. To Serene Valley and the future we're building. As they toasted, the distant sound of children's laughter echoed down the street. It was a reminder of why they were doing all this, to create a world where people like Laura could live without fear, where children could grow up in safety, and where compassion and justice walked hand in hand. That night, as they made their way home under the starry sky of Serene Valley, Emily and Michael knew they were on the threshold of something extraordinary. The neighborhood they had chosen by chance to start their life together had turned out to be the epicenter of a change that could transform the lives of thousands of people across the country. The journey that had begun with simple curiosity about a mysterious neighbor now led them down a path of purpose and meaning they could hardly have imagined. And as they prepared for the challenges ahead, they knew they had found not just a home but a mission. Autumn arrived in Serene Valley, painting the trees in shades of red and gold, a reflection of the profound changes taking place in the neighborhood. Emily was in her makeshift office reviewing the final proofs of her investigative series when the phone rang. It was Claire, her voice urgent. "Emily, we need you and Michael at Arthur's house. Now." Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, the couple hurried down Acacia Street, the dry leaves crunching under their feet. When they arrived at the grey house, they found Arthur, Claire, and an unfamiliar man in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an energy that reminded Emily of the night everything had come to light. Arthur made the introductions. "This is Robert Allen. He was one of the directors at Thompson & Allen Industries." Robert, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, greeted them with a tense nod. "I apologize for showing up like this, but the situation is delicate. I've received information that a group is planning to publicly expose everyone involved in Serene Valley, including the protected families." The shock in the room was palpable. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, thinking of Laura and all the others whose stories she had heard over the past few weeks. Michael, on the other hand, immediately began considering the security implications for the neighborhood. Claire was the first to break the silence. "How is this possible?" "We took every precaution." Robert sighed heavily. "Apparently not everyone. Years ago, before we stepped away, I kept parallel records. For safety, I thought at the time. These records, they were stolen." Arthur, who had remained silent, finally spoke. His voice was low but filled with emotion. "Who would do this and why?" "I believe it's a group of former employees from the company," replied Robert. "People who felt betrayed when we shut everything down. They probably think they're serving justice by exposing an alleged corruption scheme." Emily, her journalistic instincts sharp, began firing off rapid questions. Who were these people? How much did they really know? What was their timeline? Meanwhile, Michael was already on his phone, contacting the security team they had assembled in recent weeks. "We need to immediately reinforce all protective measures in the neighborhood," he said, his voice firm and decisive. Claire, always practical, was already drafting a plan. "We have to warn all the residents, prepare contingency plans, and maybe it's time to consider a partial evacuation." The word evacuation hung heavily in the air. Serene Valley wasn't just a collection of houses. It was a refuge, a home for people who had lost everything before finding safety there. Arthur stood up, walking to the window. His gaze wandered over the street, watching the children playing carefree, neighbors chatting on their porches. "No," he finally said, turning to face the group. "We're not evacuating. Let's fight." His declaration was met with a surprised silence, followed by a flood of questions and concerns. But Arthur raised his hand, calling for quiet. "For years we've operated in the shadows, always afraid of being discovered. But now, thanks to the work of Emily and Michael, we have allies. We have a voice. It's time to use it." Emily felt a wave of determination rise within her. "You're right," she said, her mind already formulating ideas. "We can use the media to our advantage, tell our story before they tell theirs." Michael nodded, adding, "And we can mobilize our contacts in..." The government, the senator, the federal judge, they understand the importance of what we do here. Claire, always the voice of reason, cautioned, "It will be risky. We'll be exposing a lot." "Yes," Arthur agreed, "but we'll also be protecting much more. It's time for Serene Valley to step out of the shadows and show the world the true meaning of justice and compassion." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Emily began drafting a press release, working closely with Arthur to ensure every word was carefully chosen. Michael coordinated with his security team, reinforcing protective measures throughout the neighborhood. Claire and Robert dove into the old archives, trying to anticipate what information might come to light and how they could mitigate the damage. As night fell over Serene Valley, the group gathered again in Arthur's office. The air was thick with determination and a touch of apprehension. "Tomorrow," Arthur said, his voice steady, "we will begin writing the next chapter of Serene Valley's history. It won't be easy, but together we can turn this threat into an opportunity for real change." Emily looked at Michael, seeing in his eyes the same fire she felt within herself. They had arrived in Serene Valley seeking a fresh start, a place to call home. Now they were about to help redefine the meaning of community and justice for the entire country. As the group dispersed, each heading off to execute their part of the plan, Emily paused for a moment on Arthur's porch. Gazing at the quiet street, illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights, she made a silent promise. Serene Valley and its secrets would not fall into darkness. Instead, they would bring light to a world desperately in need of hope and compassion. The challenge ahead was immense, but for the first time in weeks, Emily felt an unshakable certainty. Serene Valley would survive, and more than that, its legacy would flourish, touching lives far beyond the borders of this small neighborhood that had become the epicenter of a quiet revolution. Dawn brought with it an air of anticipation in Serene Valley. The streets, usually quiet at that hour, already showed signs of unusual activity. Neighbors whispered on their porches, casting anxious glances toward Arthur's house. Emily woke up, early, her body tense with the adrenaline of what was to come. She found Michael already in the kitchen, studying neighborhood maps and making frantic notes. "Ready?" he asked, looking up from his papers. She nodded, feeling the weight of the pen and notepad in her hands. "As ready as I can be to turn our lives upside down." The plan they had devised overnight was bold. Emily would call a press conference presenting Serene Valley to the world on their terms. Simultaneously, Michael would coordinate with authorities to ensure the safety of the neighborhood and its residents. At 9 o'clock sharp, the Serene Valley Community Center was packed. Journalists from across the country crowded in, their cameras and microphones aimed at the small makeshift stage. Arthur, Claire, and Emily stood at the center, with Michael and other key residents on either side. Emily took a step forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Good morning, everyone. Today, we are here to tell a story of courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of justice." In the following minutes, she unfolded the narrative of Serene Valley, revealing how the neighborhood had become a refuge for those the system had failed to protect. She spoke of families rebuilt, lives saved, and a community united by a greater purpose. Arthur then took the floor, his presence commanding instant respect. "For decades we operated in the shadows because it was necessary. Today we choose to step into the light because it is the right thing to do. Serene Valley is not just a place, it is an idea, the idea that we can create a more just and compassionate society." As the press conference unfolded, Michael received constant updates on his tablet. Security teams, strategically positioned around the neighborhood, reported suspicious movements, but so far, nothing posed an immediate threat. The atmosphere in the room shifted when Claire introduced Laura, the young woman Emily had interviewed weeks earlier. With tears in her eyes but a steady voice, Laura shared her story of escaping an abusive relationship and how Serene Valley had given her a second chance at life. "I am not just alive thanks to this place," she said, her voice echoing through the silent room. "I am truly living for the first time in years." The impact was immediate and palpable. Journalists who had arrived skeptical now listened intently, many visibly moved. The questions that followed were no longer accusatory but curious and even sympathetic. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Michael received an urgent message. The group threatening to expose Serene Valley had been located. They were, as suspected, former employees of Thompson & Allen Industries, led by a man named Richard Miller, an old rival of Arthur's. With a discreet nod, Michael signaled to Arthur, who skillfully redirected the press's attention to Claire. She began detailing future plans to expand the Serene Valley model, turning it into a national program for protection and reintegration. In the following minutes, a silent operation unfolded on the streets of Serene Valley. Federal agents, working in coordination with Michael's security team, surrounded an abandoned building on the outskirts of the neighborhood. Richard Miller and his associates were detained without incident, and the stolen documents were recovered before they could be leaked. Back at the community center, the press conference was reaching its peak. Emily, sensing the moment was right, made the announcement they had planned as their final move. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not just unveiling the past of Serene Valley, we are laying the foundation for the future. With the support of leaders in government and civil society, we are proposing the creation of a national network of protected communities based on the model we have built here. The buzz in the room grew. Camera flashes went off incessantly as Arthur joined Emily on stage, along with the senator who had supported the project from the beginning. "This is just the beginning," declared Arthur, his voice filled with emotion but firm in his conviction. Serene Valley was born out of the need to protect the vulnerable. Now it will become a beacon of hope for the entire country. As the press conference came to an end, Emily felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Michael, his eyes shining with a mix of relief and triumph. "We did it," he whispered. "The threat has been neutralized." The rest of the day passed in a blur of interviews, meetings, and subdued celebrations. That evening, when they finally had a moment of peace, Emily and Michael found themselves sitting on the porch of their home, gazing at the stars above Serene Valley. "Can you believe all of this?" Emily asked, her head resting on Michael's shoulder. "A few months ago, we were just a curious couple wondering about a strange neighbor." Michael chuckled softly, holding her tighter. "And now we're part of something much bigger than ourselves, something that could change lives across the country." As the night's silence enveloped them, they reflected on the journey that had brought them there and the path that lay ahead. Serene Valley had been transformed, its secrets brought to light. But instead of destruction, this revelation had brought hope and the promise of a better future. On the horizon, the city lights shimmered, a reminder of the world beyond Serene Valley that now awaited them. A world that, thanks to them and the courage of a small community, might become a little fairer, a little more compassionate. And so, under the starry sky, Emily and Michael allowed themselves a moment of peace, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories to tell, and new lives to transform. The months following the revelation of Serene Valley were a whirlwind of activity. The small neighborhood that once lived in the shadows was now in the national spotlight, quickly becoming a symbol of hope and renewal. Emily, seated in her new office at the newspaper headquarters, reread the day's headline, "Serene Valley, 1 year later, how a secret neighborhood changed the country." Her fingers traced the printed letters, a satisfied smile on her face. The series of articles she had written not only won journalism awards, but more importantly, had catalyzed real change in society. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Claire arriving for her weekly interview. "How are things in Serene Valley?" Emily asked, offering a cup of coffee. Claire smiled, the years seeming to weigh less on her face now. Transformed, but still the same at heart. "The new residents are settling in well, and Arthur, well, he finally seems at peace." The conversation flowed easily between them as they discussed the developments of the past few months. The national program inspired by Serene Valley was in full swing, with similar communities being established across the country. The legislation proposed by the senator, nicknamed the Serene Valley Act, was about to be voted on in Congress. Meanwhile, across town, Michael was leading a meeting in a bustling architecture office. Blueprints and models of new projects covered the tables, all inspired by the principles of safety and community he had learned in Serene Valley. "The challenge," he explained to his team, "is to create spaces that are safe without feeling like fortresses. We want people to feel protected, but also free. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Arthur. Important meeting tonight. Bring Emily. As evening fell, Emily and Michael met at the entrance of Serene Valley. The neighborhood, though still modest in appearance, now had an air of renewed vitality. Children played in the streets without fear, and neighbors chatted animatedly on their porches. At Arthur's house, they found not only the former guardian of Serene Valley, but also familiar and new faces. Laura was there, now confident and smiling, alongside Robert and other former residents who had returned to help with the expansion of the project. Arthur welcomed them with a warm embrace. "Welcome, my friends. We have much to discuss." The meeting that followed was a mix of reflection and planning for the future. Arthur announced his decision to officially retire, passing the torch to a new generation of leaders. "Serene Valley has grown beyond my wildest dreams," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Now, it's time to let new minds and hearts take it forward." To everyone's surprise, he turned to Emily and Michael. "You two brought light to our little secret world. I would like to invite you to take on a more active role in leading Serene Valley and its sister projects." The couple exchanged looks of astonishment and emotion. It was an immense responsibility, but also a unique opportunity to continue the work they had started almost by chance. "It would be an honor," Michael replied, his voice steady. Emily nodded, adding, "We will ensure that the story of Serene Valley continues to inspire and transform lives." The night progressed with lively discussions about the future. Plans were made to expand the protection program, create psychological and legal support centers, and establish partnerships with universities for research on social justice and community safety. When the meeting finally ended, it was already dawn. Emily and Michael walked hand in hand down the quiet street, the stars shining brightly above. "Who would have thought," murmured Emily, "that our curiosity about a strange neighbor would lead us to this?" Michael chuckled softly. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, but I'm glad we're on this journey together." Stopping in front of their house, they looked out at the street they now knew so well. Serene Valley was no longer just a neighborhood. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon of possibilities. "You know," said Emily, resting her head on Michael's shoulder, "I think I finally understand what Arthur meant when he said Serene Valley was more than a place. It's an idea, a dream of a better world." Michael nodded, holding her close. "And now it's our responsibility to keep that dream alive." As they stepped inside, both knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But there would also be triumphs, lives transformed, and the satisfaction of knowing they were making a difference. Serene Valley had started as a well-kept secret, a refuge for those in need. Now it was becoming a model for a new kind of community, an example of how compassion and justice could go hand in hand. And at the center of this transformation were Emily and Michael, two young people who had arrived seeking a fresh start and found a purpose greater than they could have ever imagined. As night gave way to dawn, a new era was dawning, not just for Serene Valley, but for an entire country beginning to awaken to the possibilities of a more just and compassionate future. The rising sun cast a golden glow over Serene Valley, illuminating the streets that now pulsed with renewed energy. It was a special day, the 5th anniversary of the neighborhood's revelation to the world. Emily woke up early, her eyes scanning the room she and Michael had turned into a mini home office. The walls were covered with maps, photos, and newspaper clippings, telling the story not just of Serene Valley, but of dozens of similar communities that had flourished across the country in recent years. It was a visual testament to the impact their work had achieved. Michael walked into the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, handing a cup to Emily. She nodded, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "I can hardly believe it's been 5 years. It feels like just yesterday we were unraveling the mystery of Arthur." The day that followed was a whirlwind of activities. Serene Valley was welcoming visitors from across the country, journalists, politicians, social activists, and, most importantly, representatives from new communities inspired by the neighborhood's model. At the community center, Now expanded and modernized, Emily and Michael led a series of panels and workshops. Topics ranged from community safety strategies to social reintegration programs and psychological support. During a break, Emily ran into Laura, now a confident lawyer specializing in human rights. "Who would have thought, huh?" Laura said, smiling. "From victim to advocate, all thanks to this place and people like you and Michael." The comment deeply moved Emily. It was a powerful reminder of why they did what they did. In the afternoon, a special ceremony was held to honor Arthur. Although he had stepped back from direct leadership, his presence was still felt on every corner of Serene Valley. When he took the stage, supported by Claire, the ovation was deafening. "My friends," Arthur began, his voice weaker but still filled with emotion. "When I started this journey so many decades ago, I never imagined it would come this far. Serene Valley was a dream born out of necessity. Today, it is a reality that inspires hope across the country." He paused, his eyes searching for Emily and Michael in the crowd. "And to the two of you, who brought our story to light, my eternal gratitude. You didn't just uncover our secret, you turned it into a national movement of compassion and justice." Arthur's words were met with emotional applause. Emily felt tears in her eyes, remembering how it all began, with a simple curiosity about a mysterious neighbor. In the evening, a more intimate celebration was held at Arthur's house. It was a select group, the pioneers of Serene Valley, along with Emily, Michael, and some of the new leaders who were driving the project forward. Claire raised her glass in a toast. "To Serene Valley," she said, "and to everyone who made this dream a reality." As the night progressed, conversations flowed freely, blending reminiscences of the past with ambitious plans for the future. They discussed expanding the program to rural areas, international partnerships, and even the possibility of creating a university focused on social justice studies and community development. In a quiet moment, Emily and Michael found themselves on Arthur's porch, gazing at the stars above Serene Valley. "Have you ever imagined," Michael asked, "what our lives would be like if we hadn't moved here?" Emily shook her head, smiling. "It's impossible to imagine. Serene Valley didn't just change our lives, it changed who we are." At that moment, they were interrupted by a group of young people, students from one of the new communities inspired by Serene Valley. They were eager to talk to the couple, their eyes shining with admiration and curiosity. "How did you do it?" asked one young woman. "How did you turn a local secret into a national movement?" Emily and Michael exchanged glances, thinking about how to respond. Finally, Michael spoke. "It was one step at a time. It started with curiosity, then came understanding, and finally, the commitment to make a difference." Emily added, "The secret is to never lose sight of why we're doing this. Every story, every transformed life is what keeps us moving forward." As they chatted with the young people sharing stories and advice, Emily and Michael felt a wave of optimism. These were the leaders of the future, ready to carry forward the legacy of Serene Valley. Later, as the party began to wind down, the couple walked hand in hand down Acacia Street. The houses, though still modest, now exuded an aura of purpose and hope. "You know," said Emily, pausing to look at her own house, "I think I finally understand what Arthur always said about Serene Valley being more than just a place." Michael hugged her, following her gaze. "It's an ideal, a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together for something greater than ourselves." As they entered the house, both knew that the work was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead, many lives to transform. But that night, under the starry sky of Serene Valley, the future seemed to shine with infinite possibilities. And so 5 years after unraveling the mystery of a reclusive neighbor, Emily and Michael found themselves at the center of a quiet revolution of compassion and justice. Serene Valley had become much more than a home. It was the beating heart of a movement that was slowly but surely changing the world. Time passed, the seasons changed, and Serene Valley continued to flourish and inspire. 10 years had gone by since Emily and Michael had unraveled the mystery that would change their lives and the lives of so many others. It was a spring morning when Emily woke up to the soft sound of children's laughter coming from the garden. She smiled, recognizing the voices of her 5-year-old twins, Laura and Miguel, playing outside. Rising quietly so as not to wake Michael, she walked to the window. The view that greeted her was a testament to how Serene Valley had evolved. The neighborhood, while maintaining its welcoming essence, now exuded an air of vitality and purpose. Community gardens flourished on every corner, solar panels adorned the rooftops, and a new learning center stood where an abandoned lot once was. Michael joined her at the window, wrapping her in a hug. "Thinking about the big day?" he asked. Softly, Emily nodded. Today was the official inauguration of Serene Valley University, a project they had dreamed of and worked tirelessly to bring to life over the past few years. It was more than an educational institution. It was a center for research and innovation, dedicated to studies in social justice, community development, and human security. As they prepared for the day, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought them there. The series of articles she had written about Serene Valley had turned into a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. Michael, in turn, had become an international consultant in humanitarian urban planning, helping to establish safe communities in conflict zones around the world. The couple left their house, walking hand in hand down Acacia Street. Each step evoked memories. There was Arthur's house, now transformed into a museum that told the story of Serene Valley. Further ahead, the old community center expanded to house psychological and legal support programs. Arriving at the new university campus, they were greeted by an excited crowd. Familiar and new faces mingled, longtime residents of Serene Valley, eager students, dignitaries, and journalists from around the world. Claire, now a woman with white hair but eyes still shining with determination, was the first to greet them. "Arthur would be so proud," she said, her voice choked with emotion. The inauguration ceremony was a moment of celebration and reflection. Emily and Michael took the stage to speak, looking out at the audience that represented the culmination of a dream that had begun with a simple act of curiosity. "Serene Valley," Emily began, her voice echoing through the amphitheater, "was born as a secret, a refuge for those society had forgotten. Today it has become a beacon of hope, a model for how we can build fairer and more compassionate communities." Michael continued, "This university is more than a collection of buildings. It is a commitment to the future. Here we will train the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and activists who will continue the work we started." As they spoke, Emily spotted Laura in the audience, now a respected law professor at the new university. Beside her was Robert, who had become a tireless advocate for human rights. Every face in the crowd told a story of transformation and hope. After the ceremony, as they walked through the new campus, Emily and Michael were approached by a young student. "Is it true," she asked timidly, "that all of this started because you were curious about a neighbor?" The couple exchanged a knowing glance, smiling. "It's true," Michael replied. "Never underestimate the power of curiosity and compassion." Emily added, "And remember, every person has a story. Sometimes all we need to do is listen and have the courage to act." That evening, back at their home on Acacia Street, Emily and Michael sat on the porch, watching the sunset over Serene Valley. Laura and Miguel played in the garden, their laughter blending with the gentle sounds of the approaching night. "Can you believe it?" murmured Emily, leaning on Michael's shoulder. "All of this because of a mysterious neighbor." Michael chuckled softly. "And to think we almost didn't move here." They fell silent for a moment, soaking in the peace of the night and the weight of all they had accomplished. Serene Valley was no longer just a neighborhood or even a model community. It was a movement, a philosophy of life that was spreading across the world. "What does the future hold?" asked Emily, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the first stars were beginning to appear. Michael gently squeezed her hand. "I'm not sure, but I know we'll face it together. Us, our family, and this amazing community we've built." As night fell over Serene Valley, wrapping the neighborhood in its starry embrace, Emily and Michael knew their journey was far from over. Each new day would bring challenges, opportunities, and stories waiting to be told. And so, what had begun as a mystery about a reclusive neighbor had transformed into a saga of hope, courage, and transformation. Serene Valley, with its secrets now out in the open, continued to grow, inspire, and change lives, a living testament to the power of curiosity, compassion, and the courage to make a difference. As the stars shone above, Emily and Michael looked at each other, their eyes reflecting the love, partnership, and shared commitment that had brought them this far. In Serene Valley, they had not only found a home, they had discovered a purpose, a mission, and a legacy that would endure long beyond their lives. And so the story of Serene Valley, a story of secrets revealed, lives transformed, and a brighter future, continued to be written not just in the pages of books or on the walls of a university, but in the hearts and actions of all those touched by its message of hope and change.